Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Views on Vue. It's been a few weeks because I've been busier than a long-tail cat in a rocking chair contest. I just learned that one today. I am Steve Edwards, the host with the face for radio and the voice for being a mime, and I am here with my returning guest host slash guest slash Vue Ninja, Erik Hanchett. How you doing, Erik?
Hey, Steve. I'm doing good. Thanks for having me back on again.
Always a
Appreciate it.
pleasure. Always a pleasure. So Erik pinged me because he just came back from VueConf. Yay! And which reminds me. Sorry, audience, I forgot about you. I know you're still there. I love you. But they're very happy about hearing about VueConf. So we're going to talk about VueConf and maybe some conferences, just general conference stuff. And a couple other things too, just sort of rambling here. We definitely pre-planned this one. So let's start out talking about VueConf. VueConf was in Nolens, Louisiana. That's New Orleans for those who don't get my amazing Cajun accent. And what was happening at VueConf?
It was fun. It was happening. So those who don't know, VueConf is like the annual big. Let me preface this. VueConf US. There is an Amsterdam one that's even bigger than VueConf US, but VueConf US happens every year. They change locations every year. I've been to one in Austin. It was in like Tampa Bay one year, and New Orleans was this year. It was also in. People say I'm probably mispronouncing this. New Orleans. Is that how you pronounce New Orleans? I think.
Nolens is how I see it. N apostrophe AWLINS.
Anybody that's listening right now, please pardon me because I'll probably mispronounce it. I'm just going to pronounce it like I used to pronounce it, New Orleans.
There you go.
Anyways, that was the first location of the first VueConf, I believe, and now they have brought it back to the same location again. So it's a single track, 2-day, well, it's 3-day conference. The first day is a workshop, and that was Wednesday of this year, and then Thursday and Friday were the actual conference part of it. And it was at the Ace Hotel this year. I've gone to it a few times. One in person in 2020, which was a different experience because of the pandemic. It was held in March, right before all the lockdowns. It was kind of a weird year. I heard a lot of people like went to VueConf and left early because it was
wow.
like the pandemic hit right in the middle of it. I remember they had rules when you were coming in, like to do fist bumps, not to shake anybody's hands. They had Ben Hong and I can't remember his co-presenter. They wore dinosaur suits, like filled up, like one of those dinosaur suits that you walk around in, and it was really, it was a different year that year. It was fun though. This year, I believe in 2021, it was canceled,
Probably.
or it was only virtual, I think. And then 2022, it was in Tampa Bay, in Florida, and now, or in Florida, that is. And then now 2023, it's in New Orleans. I try to go to every single VueConf that I can go to. I try to talk at every single VueConf is my goal. So every time it comes around, I submit a talk. I've never been able to do like a full talk, but I've done a few lightning talks there. So this was no different. So I was able to do a lightning talk on the first day. So I did a talk on creating my first open source Vue library. I think I talked about it a little bit on a previous podcast. So this was all about the experience I had at working at AWS. And for the first 2 years of my job, we rewrote we call it an authenticator. It's a way for users to log in, log out, sign up. And so that was an experience. So that was kind of a fun talk to do. It was about 10, 15 minutes on average to do it. It was also, I just love going to VueConf. Every time I go there, I get to see some amazing people. I got in on Tuesday. Actually, I'll tell a little story. This might some people might relate to this. So I'm in Nevada. So I flew from Reno, Nevada to Denver, and then Denver to New Orleans. And I made the classic mistake. So on my trip from Denver to New Orleans, I my you travel a lot. Do you travel a lot, Steve?
A decent amount, a couple times, 2, 3 times a year. I used to travel like 2 or 3 times a month,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I'm starting to travel a little bit more because I'm doing more developer advocacy for AWS Amplify. So I always bring a few things. I always bring my Steam Deck, which is like this big portable like kind of video game. It runs Steam. If you guys haven't like Nintendo Switch, you might. It's kind of similar, but it's a lot bigger and it runs PC games. I also bring my Kindle. I also bring, of course, my laptops and everything. And I always take those on as carry-on. So on my flight from Denver to New Orleans, I like it was like 3 hours long. I took all that stuff out of my back. I took my backpack on as a carry-on with all that stuff in it. During the flight, I took all that stuff out and I put it underneath my seat in front of me, like I normally do. And I was kind of pulling out the stuff in front of me and looking at it. And I decided to give myself a little bit more leg room. I took the backpack and I put it in the overhead compartment in front of me, so I just had all my stuff on the ground. That was the mistake. So when the flight ended, I'm usually pretty good at this, but I usually like take all my stuff and I put it back. I take my backpack out, and I'm always on the aisle seat instead of like the one near the window. I like the
right.
aisle. So as soon
Uh-huh.
as the flight ends, as soon as like the seatbelt sign goes off and we're like on the ground, I get up, I take my backpack out, and I start loading my stuff in. And this lady next to me, very, I think she had a long day, was said I was taking up the spot in that aisle, that I wasn't letting her out. So I had to kind of I moved out of the way so she could get out, but it somehow like threw my whole rhythm out of place, and I left my Steam Deck,
Oh,
the on the plane, this
oh,
$600 device, underneath the seat in front of me, and that was the last time I saw it. And
oh no.
I put in my I put in uh, my lost and found with Southwest and New Orleans, and it was still gone. So that was like the first day of
Oh.
VueConf for me, is leaving something on the plane, which in my many years of being alive, I've never done before.
Well,
Obviously,
at
it's no
what
one's
point
fault
did you
except my own.
realize you left it? Was it like way
As soon
after
as I
you're
got
at
to
the hotel?
I got to the hotel that later that night,
Oh,
and then I realized I didn't have it, and
oh,
that flight was continuing on to Florida.
yeah.
So I knew that it was gone. So I'm sure someone's enjoying the Steam Deck now. But that was the first day of it. Have you ever left anything on the plane on a plane?
Yeah, I've left small stuff like books. Oh, I left my phone. Recently, I left my phone, but I realized it like as I was stepping off the plane. It's like, oh shoot, because I always do, as I'm leaving, I always sort of do, your mental checks. Okay, do I have this and this and this? Because there's times where I'll put something in the seat in front of me, in the, the little holder there on the seat in front of you,
Hmm.
and then forget it somehow. So I've gotten in the habit of doing mental checks. Well, for whatever reason, I had phone wasn't in my pocket. And so as I stepped off the plane, I was like, oh shoot. And I turned around and go back like, nope, sorry. Once you're off, you can't get back on. But a lot of times they'll have the cleaning crew already on the plane as passengers are still leaving because they're trying to make a really quick turnaround. And so they already had a cleaning crew on. And so they went back to my seat and found my phone and brought it up to me. Other times they've left books, but yeah, nothing, nothing like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Nothing quite that
books.
expensive.
Yeah, I wish I would have realized before I got out of the airport. But once I was out, it was impossible. I've had that
Oh,
once before where I left something and then they're like, "Oh, we'll go get it." Like, but I had to wait until everybody's off the plane and the cleaning crew's gone through and everything like that.
hmm.
But hey,
Sorry to
if
hear
anybody's listening and they have found a Steam Deck, let me know. I'm just kidding.
that.
But no, I ended up yeah, then I ended up just going to the conference center. They had it at, I think it was called like Hotel Max, oh, Ace Hotel. The Ace Hotel, which was a really cool hotel and conference center in one place. So that's another
Oh, that's cool.
that's a tip. Like if you're going to a conference, try to get the recommended hotels that most conferences tell you to stay at is probably the one you should stay at. Unless you're trying to really save money, stay
Hmm.
at the recommended hotel because it's usually the closest to where you need to be, and they give discounts for hotel guests. So that's where I stayed. It was much smaller than the one in Florida the year before. I think the conference, I think they're still recovering from like COVID. I think the COVID years kind of declined all conferences everywhere. Attendance kind of declined a little bit. And now, like a lot of conferences who were coming back in the last year or two are not at that pre-pandemic level. And that's exactly how it felt with VueConf US. Still, there was hundreds of people there, which was really awesome. And I um, I spent the first day in New Orleans. I kind of traveled around. I went to Cafe Du Monde, which I had a beignet, which was. Have you had a beignet before? It's pretty
A
delicious.
beignet. Fresh my mind what it is.
Uh,
I might have when I was down there. It
It's
sounds
like a
familiar.
donut. It's like a powdery donut. It's kind of a little bit what New Orleans is known for.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I had one of those. Kind of just walked around a little bit. I did have some work stuff to do, so part of the day I was kind of working remotely from my from the conference, not from the conference room because it wasn't open on the first day. It was only open for people taking workshops. And I spent most of the day just uh, walking around and then doing a little bit of work. And then the second day, I was spent all day at the conference, and I did meet another. Usually, I go to VueConf by myself, but this year I actually had someone else from my department, from AWS Amplify, to come with me, so that was
Oh, that's
nice.
cool.
But I would say, like going to conferences, I would say even if you're going by yourself, I think is worth it because you really want to meet other people. I think
Hmm.
that's like the number one goal of going to a conference is just meeting more people, talking to people. The the talks are good, but you could argue that you could like watch the talks
Right.
on YouTube later
Right.
or find similar topics and blog posts out there if you really wanted to. But talking to the people was really interesting. I'll take a breath there. Do you have any questions on it?
Uh, yeah. Well, I guess I'd be curious to see one, who you met, if there's anybody, maybe that's on your, hey, I'd love to meet these people bucket list, and two, what you learned from a technical standpoint about Vue, if you learned anything new about Vue, what's coming down the pike, or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah. So I got to meet, well, first, I've met Evan Yu before, so it was nice to meet him again. And he is so accessible because he was available at the after party. So that's another thing. So they had the first day, the whole day was talks from basically 8 o'clock was breakfast, and then they had talks until about 5:30, and then they had an after party at 6:30. So this is kind of interesting. They had something called a second line, which is we all gathered outside a Lucy's Surfer Bar, which is like this little bar nearby the conference. And then they had a band play, and we kind of marched from Lucy's bar to where the after party was. And I have pictures. I posted on social media on Twitter. If you follow me, Eric CH, you can see it.
Hmm.
But we all kind of just walked and talked, and it was like kind of the it was fun. It was a little weird. It was like I've never been in this second line. I guess this is like a New Orleans
Yeah.
thing where it's to promote people who I'm gonna look at the definition.
Is it like a Mardi Gras type thing, or just in general?
Yeah, a second line is a tradition in parades organized by social aid and pleasure clubs with brass band parades in New Orleans, Louisiana. The main line or first line is the second section of the parade, or the members of the SAPCA. So it's like a little bit of a parade. I think it has roots in like West African circles and ring dances about people who've passed away. I think it has like the kind of like jazz funeral roots to
Hmm.
it. It was really interesting. So it was fun just kind of walking down the street and everybody was taking pictures. And then we got to this open bar after party, and like everybody was there. Everybody was super open to just answer questions. All the like most of the speakers were there too, and then they had food too. So I mean that was pretty fun. So answer your question, yeah, definitely, Evan. I think if you go to a VueConf, at least kind of just giving him a high five or thanking him for his time is well worth it. And a couple of other people I really like talking to. I met Daniel Rowe. Have you
Yes.
ever had him
Oh,
on this
yeah.
podcast?
Multiple times. I'd love to meet Daniel. He's awesome.
Yeah, so if you don't know, he's like a Nux core team member. So we talked about Nuxt a lot. I think he may have, I'm not sure where he's out of, but he may have
He's
traveled
in
far.
England. He's in London, I
Yeah.
think, or UK.
Yeah, so like one of the hype you see on Twitter now is everybody's talking about React server components. It's
Right.
kind of the big update through Vercel did recently. Well, Next did recently. So I was kind of talking to him about like what's the difference between that and Nuxt, and Nuxt has something similar with these like server island components.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was great talking to him. I did talk to some people from the Vue School and Vue Mastery.
Oh, yeah.
Always,
That's Ben Hong and Adam Jar.
yep. I talked to Adam. He's always like a pleasure to talk to. He's always the stuff that they're doing at Vue Mastery. If you don't know, is like Vue School and Vue Mastery are like the pretty much the number one Vue resources out there. They always go to every single VueConf. They almost compete a little bit too. It feels like just with kind of getting awareness out for their services. Yes, I talked to him. Um, I talked to Mark Noonan. He's from Cyprus.
Oh, okay.
Have you? I think have you
Uh,
talked to him on the podcast
JavaScript
before?
Jabber, we talked to somebody from Cyprus at some point, and I don't remember who it was. I have to look it up. But yeah, I remember that. That's been 2 or 3 years, I think.
Yep.
Brian
Yeah.
Mann was who we talked to at Cyprus.
Ah. Yeah, I talked to Daniel Kelly, which is he
Yeah.
does another guy from Vue School. I talked to Jess Sachs a little bit. She does a lot of testing stuff. Yeah, I got to talk to quite a few people, and those were all highlights. Definitely people I haven't talked to. I got to talk to Ben Hong again. I hadn't talked to him since 2020, since last time we were all in a conference together. Yeah, it was just a pleasure talking to everybody, and I'm probably missing a bunch of people I talked to. I'm just trying to look them up right now. So that was really fun. It's also I was gonna say too. I got to talk to some people in between the talks and then the after party, and then the first night right after the after party, everybody went back to the hotel and they had a karaoke night.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so a bunch like I think Evan. I didn't stay long enough, but Evan, you did his karaoke. He's known for his karaoke,
Hmm.
I guess. And a bunch of other people did karaoke, which was really cool. I stayed for a little bit, but I was like super tired. I was still jet lagged. I'd only been there a couple days, so I just went back to my room. But that's the kind of stuff that we did there on the first day. The technical talks, there were so many of them, and a few that I remember is it's all kind of a blur. The Nux talk view to the edge was kind of interesting, talking about how I think that's Sebastian that talked all about how Next works on the edge and how that worked. Patterns for large scale Vue.js applications was interesting. That was another talk by Daniel Kelly. So that was really good. The Cypress talks by Mark Noonan was really good. Keyboard accessibility, that was an interesting one. And hopefully all these talks will eventually be up on Vue Mastery's website, I believe.
Yeah, they do all. I think they do all the VueConf videos, if I remember right.
Yeah, Homer Gaines, I got to meet him for the first time. Another guy, amazing. Also, I got to talk to a lot to Alex as well. Yeah, Homer. Anytime I think of accessibility, I think of Homer, and he does a lot of conferences, and he had a great conference talk on the first day. The second day, I can say actually he was on the second day. Oh, no, he was on the first day. On the second day, Adam Jar's proven opinion patterns. I always like just so impressed by the presentations that these guys do, especially anybody in the Vue Mastery team. It's like they have such crazy presentations and graphics moving everywhere. It was great. Cecilia did a talk on Ionic that I was really interesting.
Cecilia Martinez.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, I did an episode with her on debugging in Vue
Mm.
a little while ago, probably about a year or something like that.
Yeah, she's great. She did a really good talk. Conquering views and forms in Vue.
Ooh, I would have liked that.
Anything about forms? Like forms is deceptively easy. That was by Justin Schroeder. That was good. I think the most favorite talk of the conference, and I think I'm gonna make sure I get this right. It was by Lee Martin. Have you heard of Lee Martin?
Not ringing a bell.
So he did a talk how he was using, and his talk was titled Appetite for Components, but
Okay.
he creates experimental web apps for artists. So during his talk, he talked about how he used Vue apps to create like apps for like Foo Fighters, Florence and the Machine, Metro Boomin. I think he mentioned Beyonce at one time. And he was talking, Jack White was doing it. So these huge performers will have like a new album coming out, and then they'll hire like I think his agency to create like some kind of app. Like a lot of time it's like AR, or it'll be like some virtual reality app. And so he has all these like creative ideas of how to create apps. So like I think the Jack White one was they wanted to do an app that anybody could log into, and then you were randomly put together with another person in Jack White's audience. So think of it kind of like uh, what's that app that people can join randomly to talk to other people? Uh,
Amigo?
yeah, like Amigo or something like that. So he was talking about how he created that application, how he put it together. Then some of the apps that you did was like, oh, you go here and you play a song and then you could share it. Like he always had like viral parts of the app that he put in. I'm not giving it much justice from the look I see on your face right now, Steve,
Oh
for
no,
the
I'm reading
podcast.
about it. I'm just reading about it on the conference website. I was
It
looking
was
at some
like
other stuff
it was
too.
a really interesting because he also played music and video, and I just had no idea that like someone was using Vue apps to create these mobile applications for bands and do these really interesting projects. So that was my favorite talk of the show, just because it was really different. And then the last thing we did on the first day or on the second day is they did PowerPoint karaoke.
Yeah, I was just
I've
reading
never
about that. It looks like fun.
Yeah, I've never heard of this before, and this is the first time I wasn't involved with it, but I watched. Is they brought all the presenters up, or almost all the presenters got onto stage, and then they randomly uh, they had like this slide deck that was created via AI. Like had slide deck was like randomly generated groupings of images that played for 20 seconds, and there's 20 slides, and each speaker had to go up there and give a presentation, basically a 5-minute presentation, just making everything up, and it
Oh
was just
gosh.
hilarious.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I could have fun
And
with
I
that.
and you could see like some of the speakers were like just on top of it, just was able to nail it, and it was really funny. So
Yeah, those
overall,
that
like
can improv, those that can improvise are really be
exactly, yeah,
perfect for something like that.
that was another like highlight of the show, especially at the end of the day. Like you have all this information, and you're just like your brain's about to explode, and just to have something fun was really cool. Yeah, so overall, I had like a blast just meeting everybody. I had definitely a handful of like viewers of Program with Erik on my YouTube channel came up to me and thanked me, and it was always like really cool to listen to people that either heard me on Views on View or my YouTube channel, like come up and
Hmm.
say hi. So that was really cool, and they were all really encouraging to like just keep going. We want more content, and
Yeah, I was
yeah,
imagining you having like an autograph line for all
nah,
your videos and stuff that you do.
no, I'm not that popular. I will
Yeah,
say I went after this conference. I went to Render Atlanta, and Render Atlanta was I actually saw a couple of quote unquote influencers, and they did have like lines of people, like people giving them high fives, taking selfies with them. Like we do have some big people in the tech space that people recognize and
Or
talk
like
to.
a Kent C. Dodds or something, or a
Yeah,
Brendan
yeah.
Ike, or
Well, like James Q. Quick was
yeah,
there. He Danny Thompson.
don't know him. We
Um,
interviewed James Quick on JavaScript Jabber, I think, unless we're
oh,
talking
really?
about Quick, the framework. I lose track.
Uh,
But yeah, he sounds
no,
familiar.
yeah. Some people that like I know from the YouTube community. You find too when you go to these conferences. At least I can't say for the attendees, but for the speakers, it's kind of like a small community. Like you tend to start seeing the same
Right.
people,
Hmm.
especially for speakers if you're like in the web development world.
Right.
And it's really cool to see like these people who you've met at other conferences and they're just doing their thing, creating amazing content, teaching people.
Hmm.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I can. Unfortunately, I've been planning on going to VueConf twice. First time I was supposed to go was in 2019, and I was all signed up, and my company was sending me, and I was actually going to do one of the workshops that are on the days before, the presentations start taking place, and I was going to do one with Evan Yu on a deep dive into Vue or something like that. And then my own fault, I ended up leaving the company prior to the conference
Mm,
and didn't get to go. I was so bummed about that. And then within the past couple of years, I'd requested budgeting, for VueConf, since that's what I do, every day. And yeah, we were going to do it, but then come budgeting time, it was like, yeah, it's not going to happen. So I was like, dang it. So yeah, I
yeah.
really want to go. I've worked quite a bit with Adam Jar. I think I've mentioned to you. I know I've mentioned on here that I did a basic Next class
Mm,
course for Vue mastery, and actually had Adam on afterwards. I think back in December sometime, talking about the whole process of creating the videos and what goes into them, because it's crazy what they do. You mentioned yourself, the graphics and the things they do with their
mm.
presentations. They're really, really good at that kind of stuff. They got a couple guys that do a lot of that for them that are really good, and they've got it down to an art.
I,
So
I
yeah, I can just imagine. But Adam's really cool. He's a lot of fun, real nice, easygoing guy to deal with. Just when you talk to him in private, he's just the way he comes across on his videos or doing presentations.
Very clear. Yeah, yeah. I'm impressed with them. I was gonna say with Adam, with yeah, I am trying to work with Vue Mastery, hopefully on at some point on like a
Hmm.
course too. I want to do that with them, and I'm just working on that too, hopefully for the future. I do have going back to the first thing you said, I do have opinions on that. So
On what?
uh, on like going to conferences if
Hmm.
you can't pay for them, I would
Oh, right,
say like I would recommend like to for most people if you're listening right now and you kind of just listened to the last half hour and you're interested in conferences or at least VueConf, is to try to work with your company to pay for you to go. Unless you're like already in the area where the conference is and it's going to be kind of a low lift for you to go, I think almost always like you should try to get your company to pay for it. And I think VueConf and other conferences will give you templates. Like, here, download this template and give it to your boss, which gives you like stats of like why you should go and why it's a benefit for you to kind of like convince your boss
right.
to pay for it. Obviously, no, that's not going to work for everybody, with the economy and everything that's happening, it's not always going to work. But I'd say it's, yeah, I wouldn't pay for to go to a conference unless I was like starting my own business or something, or as a freelancer. I think it's just kind of hard to swing because a lot of these conferences are like 800 to $1,000 to just for the ticket, and that's not including travel and everything. So I would try to definitely do that. And then I would say if you do get, and you can also, I've heard some people too where they get where they are able to make a deal with their employer where their employer will pay for their ticket and they'll pay for the travel, or the employer will pay for the travel and they'll pay for the ticket. So I'd say you can make your best judgment if it's worth it, but at least having kind of your employer pay for something, because it is well worth it as an employee to learn these technologies, to meet these people, to do these things. Even, I said before that you can learn a lot of these things online, and maybe the talks isn't as important, but I think sometimes just being at a place where everybody's watching a talk is something where you're going to pay attention way more than if you're just sitting at lunch and trying to watch a YouTube video while you're eating. It's not going to, but if you're in the conference room, you're more likely to like absorb the information. You're going to be talking to people afterwards. So I think that's kind of a better learning experience. I'd also say like another tip is to put your phone away. I saw so many people with like their phones and then some people just doing work on their laptop. And I've been guilty of that too before. I think one of the first talks I went to at VueConf, I spent one talk. I had like some work emergencies. I was on my laptop the whole time and I like barely absorbed the talk. I'd say if you can also be very present, put your phone away. If you have your laptop out, only use it for notes. Turn off your instant messenger service so that way you can be present. And then another tip I wrote down here too was when you're at a conference, uh, and hopefully your employer paid for some of it, if not all of it, is to cancel all your normal meetings that you have. Uh, Unless it's like a very, very important meeting that you're supposed to be at. It's the worst thing is like being at a conference and then having to leave at like 9:30 a.m. to go to a like right in the middle of a talk to go to your hotel room for an hour and then have to come back. It's just like it throws you off. You'll miss a lot of good information. Sometimes you'll miss lunches or other things. So I would be like try to like push off as many meetings I could and cancel them all so you can be just in person there the whole time.
Yeah, so I haven't been able to go to VueConf yet, but for a number of years, I went to a lot of Drupal conferences, which were at the time frame I was going, they were huge. We'd get like 3,000 people at a conference in big places like the Moscone Center, San Francisco. When I had one in New Orleans a few years ago, it was at the convention center there.
Mm.
So they were huge. But with my experience and then listening to other people talk about conferences, to your point, yeah, a lot of times you can watch the videos later of the presentations, and the bigger track, conference track that people will call it is the hallway track. In other words, the people you meet out in the hallway and sit down and talk with, from that world, I can remember meeting a lot of great people. And one of the things that the DrupalCon used to do, there was two things. I don't know if the VueConf does this, but one is they would have what's called birds of a feather sessions. And so these were smaller rooms that were set up for people that wanted to get together and talk about a particular thing, whether it's mapping or how to do this or that. Everybody had a comment, and you'd go sign up, okay, for this room on this day, I want to have this session. And then everybody would, show up for that session. That was cool. And then the other things they would have was called the Coder Lounge. And that was for the geeks that wanted to sit there and program the whole time, even though they're at a conference for whatever reason. And they actually had a good, purpose in that, and people would see each other at a conference. Hey, I've been having this problem. Yeah, let's go work on that. And they could sit down and work on something. I know that there were a couple of times where I was running into a really thorny problem in my day-to-day at my work, and with a particular, what Drupal calls modules, WordPress calls plugins, we would call libraries, whatever. And I went into a coder lounge, and here's the guy that maintains the whole thing right there. And I'd sit down for like 10 minutes, and he'd show me, oh yeah, this is how to get around that. And I could get past that roadblock really quick. So, but to my point, just the getting to meet people in person, build relationships, because a lot of times you're like, hey, I met you at VueConf, remember me? Oh yeah, what can I do for you, type of thing. And as for someone doing a podcast, it'd be awesome to go and connect with people and talk to them for sure. And then finally, to your point about the presentations themselves and being focused, that's, for sure. But one of the things you can do a lot of times, depending on how many people want to do that, is maybe talk to the presenter afterwards. Hey, you mentioned this thing or this thing. What did you mean by that? Or what about this? Or, there's things to get. I can remember back in the days when I was first learning Apache Solr, which is, your Lucene-based search. It's Elasticsearch or Algolia. Now is probably the more popular and well-known proprietary implementations. But I remember learning some stuff in a presentation that I took back, and I was able to look at the video and go through and stop and look, okay, this is what he was doing here, and implement that, in my day-to-day. But to your point, just the meeting people, the putting faces together, and actually getting to sit down and talk to somebody and not have to send them a message, email, or a a Twitter DM or whatever, and actually hash things out. It's similar. The way I see it is it's similar to the benefit of being in person in an office versus everybody remote. For that reason, my company, we're all remote. We're all over the country, but we'll get together twice a year at a minimum, and just spend a week together in the office working and do some fun things, but working. And we get a ton accomplished when we're all in the same room versus when we're all remote uh, at the time. So anyway, those are my comments on conferences
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
I
And then
like that.
the one thing I will note too for
Mhm.
conferences, at least for me, especially in warm places like a New Orleans or a Tampa or something like that, I've never understood this logic. But apparently, when it's really, really super hot and humid outside, what you do is you make the inside so cold that you need to wear a parka just to stay warm inside of a building, whether it's a restaurant. So I would go to places like that where it's super warm, but I had to dress for inside the conference venue because it was so cold in there all the time. But I'm also a wimp when it comes to cold. Uh, Other people like it that cold and feel comfortable. But
You think that was on purpose? You think the conference does that on purpose, like keep people awake or something?
keep you awake, right? So you don't get too drowsy. Who
Yeah,
knows?
yeah. I like that idea of the I VueConf. They did have a room that was specifically for like meeting people. And I think
Hmm.
I remember them saying, I'm probably gonna get this wrong, but I remember them saying like the beginning of the first day, like they had one room you can eat breakfast with, where you were. I think both rooms had one room was specifically made for the bigger tables where you're it's kind of facilitating more people to meet each other because everybody like each table it's like 15 people. But they also had on the door like you can just meet here if you're the first if you're by yourself at the conference and you don't know anyone. They
Hmm.
actually had I think they had everybody raise their hands at the beginning, and I think a good chunk of people, like 25% of people, it was like they were by themselves. So there's a lot of other people
Oh
that
yeah,
didn't have coworkers that are coming with them and they were
sure.
just by themselves. And then they also had quite a few chunk of people that this was like their first VueConf in general. So it's definitely meant to meet people. So you could go to these rooms at your lunch and breakfast where you can just sit with other people and talk to them. And then also, uh, I think they had an informal way of like you could go to a room if you don't know anybody and talk to somebody too. When I was at EmberConf, they actually had like a friendly speed. I don't think they call it speed dating, like speed meeting people. Obviously, it's not dating, but it was just like for people who were the first time at EmberConf, everybody would go to this event, and it happened like at 7 or 8 o'clock at night the day before the conference started. And so we all got there, and then they had these little tables, and everybody sat next to the table, and then a group of people would go around, and you would just kind of just connect with people. So they had like a very formal process of meeting people um, for people who were like brand new to that conference. I think they did a pretty good job just facilitating just people meeting each other. I do like that coding lounge because I think at every conference I see just people on their laptops sitting outside the conference just working on something and maybe having a place where all those people can be like at the same place. That would make sense.
One quick question.
Yep.
So, did you notice a particular dominance of laptop brands? I can tell you what I've always noticed, but I'm curious to see if you notice like a Linux versus a Mac versus Windows laptops at all.
Generally I see a lot of Macs,
Yep.
but I
Yep.
don't remember seeing and then there's always a handful of Windows, but I probably
Hmm.
predominantly Macs,
Yeah, that's usually what I
MacBooks.
see too. That's sort of funny. So, all right. So, with time constraints, we'll move on to picks. I'll go first, real quick. Um, First of all, I found an interesting post here via Hacker News on a website called Codium, and it relates to VS Code, which is an uber popular, IDE for web developers. And the title is "Why Did Microsoft Build VS Code?" Turns out GitHub Copilot. And the TLDR is that Microsoft is breaking its open and extension-friendly ethos with VS Code in order to cripple GitHub Copilot competitors with restricted APIs. So the guy goes through and gives some specific examples and other documentation. Haven't digested the whole thing, but considering the popularity of VS Code in the web developer ecosystem, it seems to be, or world, it seems to be fairly relevant for sure.
Nice.
Uh, Dad jokes of the week. Um, people talk about AI and merging, technology with humans, sort of a Borg-like thing. So along those lines, I got a clock implanted in my brain, but it didn't take long before I started having second thoughts. The other day I was talking to a psychiatrist, and I asked my doctor, I said, maybe you can cure me of my fear of being randomly sniped, like with a sniper. And he said, that's a long shot. I said, yeah, I know what it means. And then finally, my son, he's 20 and he's getting older. And he asked me one day what it's like to be a parent. So I woke him up at 2:00 in the morning to tell him that my sock came off. Those of you who have little kids can very easily empathize with that one. Cool. You got any picks for us, Eric?
Can I promo something?
Shameless plugs. We're all about shameless plugs.
Shameless plug. I'm starting a new Twitch show. If you go to twitch.com, it's on the AWS channel. It's going to be a front end and web dev hour. So it's going to be 9 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesdays. So if you go to the AWS channel on Twitch, 9 a.m. on Wednesdays, I'll be doing this new channel where I'll be talking to front-end developers. I'll be doing live coding. You'll be seeing me making a lot of mistakes trying to do live coding and Googling and probably wasting a whole hour not knowing what you're doing. But I think it'll be fun, and hopefully we'll get some cool users. So yeah, check that out. 9 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesdays. Web Dev Hour on the Twitch AWS channel.
That's how we all code. Lots of Googling and making mistakes, right?
Yep.
So.
Yep, and I'll also be talking about like front end tech, and hopefully I'll have some interviews too. So maybe Steve, maybe I'll get you.
Oh, there we go. Right on. All right. So before we go, I'd like to say thank you to the studio audience for coming. Always nice to have you. Tickets sell out well ahead of time because of demand. So if you want tickets and you're here in the Portland area, then feel free to contact me on Twitter at Wonder95. Alrighty, so with that, we will wrap this up. Thank you, Eric, for coming and enlightening us with your VueConf experience. And we will talk at you all next time.
Bye.